television has nowhere near the power of algorithms on social media to feed continually stories that draw people in. It just gets continually refined and refined.
And we think of social media as this really neutral, objective platform where anybody can say anything and ideas circulate. But the algorithms are extraordinarily important, right? They suppress some posts, they celebrate others, and they're built to serve a particular kind of logic, right? And it's not all that different from the logic of commercial television, in that advertising is the economic engine that drives social media. So the goal of the algorithm is to encourage people to stay plugged in. What they don't want us to do is to log off and to put it away. So the algorithms are privileging the kinds of content that they know are going to stir that sort of emotional reaction and really make people or encourage people to want to be plugged in and want to care, want to chime in, want to share. And so that only exacerbates these divides that we're experiencing.
And we do have some agency on this. We could regulate those social media companies, but we need leaders, political leaders,
right,
who have the courage to take those organizations on.
Yeah, there's some really interesting dynamic here. You know, when radio was invented, became a mainstream thing in the 1920s, it took very little time for the federal government to work out a set of regulations that remained in place for decades, that established the whole regulatory regime by which the broadcast industry structured itself. Social media, digital media, there's nothing. There's almost no regulation whatsoever. And it's been years. The horse is certainly out of the barn on this one. But there could be will. I think of information as infrastructure. You know, we rely on the roads and the water pipes and the electrical grid to make our civilization work, but we also rely on information. And just as we expect that the roads are regulated, right, that the air will be clean, that our drinking water will be provided to us and won't be sold simply at market value, right? We never think of water as a commodity where if you can afford it, you get it. And if you can't, well, then you don't, then you can die of thirst, right? That's an abhorrent idea. But information, we tend to not think of it as infrastructure. We tend to think of it as economic commodity. And I think we see the consequences of that. There is a small but growing movement to say we have to think about information, particularly social media, as critical infrastructure for the flow of society, for commerce, and for the democratic project itself, and that we need to have the political will to tackle this problem. If we don't, especially as we start moving into the age of AI, right, I think all bets will be off if we can't come up with meaningful regulation.
Yeah, I've had a number of guests on the show suggest that social media ought to be a utility and having us pay for it, as opposed to having them use our data, sell our data, have it as a manipulative tool. And I think there's a lot of validity to that.
The very idea that social media is for profit, right? That didn't have to be the case. And it wasn't the case in its origins. You know, Zuckerberg and his buddies at Harvard didn't invent Facebook because they were in pursuit of profit. They did it because they thought it was an interesting technological problem, that it could serve the kind of social needs that they felt as 19-year-old boys in college. It was only later, when they started thinking, how can we monetize this, that they realized that they could sell access to data and that would become the profit center. Incredible consequences of that move. And it's a weird question, right? We seem to be okay. I was watching Elon Musk's interview with DealBook from the New York Times yesterday, and thinking we seem to be okay with the very richest people in the world singularly or single-handedly owning our communication infrastructure. And to me, to my way of thinking, that's a tremendous amount of power and trust to put in the hands of people who may or may not deserve it. And I feel like our democracy demands better.